we're all set. So welcome to our ongoing series of first Friday of the month webinars. We're starting a new series around PM change and how to better manage change. And the first of this series is all about the 5 stages of the change curve. So very happy to have a really good turnout so far today, and hopefully a few more will join us. Just as we get started though, I want to do a quick shout out to CMI Canada. We actually had the international president visiting us this morning all the way from Auckland, New Zealand, and Jane, she came in and gave a quick little informal session this morning for a number of change practitioners that Title Shift sponsored. And it was a fantastic session. So really energized around this whole concept of managing change. Okay, so I'm getting the note. As we move into this, just as usual, our host today, myself, David Donaldson, I'll be leading us through the session. For sound and technology issues, keep in mind that we do record these. Sometimes your computer takes a few moments to get lined up, etc. Again, we always record these and make them available. We have some user tools for you. The first of which is you have a raise your hand icon at the top of the screen. So if you're having any issues or questions, or you want to, raise your hand, please do so. There's going to be the chat box, which we've already, I see, made good use of so far this morning. Feel free to type in there at any time. Scott will be monitoring that. If there's any issues, he'll draw those to my attention. And of course, as always, we accept applause. So we're going to start right off with a poll. Now, I didn't get a chance to get everything fully set up, so we're just going to use our chat box for our polling today. And I want to ask this: what percentage of change initiatives succeed? And this is according to research. So I'm going to just pop it in the chat box on the right-hand side there and type in what percentage you think succeed. Okay, so we're getting a myriad of answers here. None of them are saying D, which is a little depressing, unfortunately. We've got a couple people saying 30%, 55%. Excuse me, Steve is at 70. Quite a few answers around the 30%, a few at the 55, and unfortunately, according to John Cotter's research, it's about 30%, which is kind of a sad statement when we think about this. Anytime we're leading change, we are, investing time, money, and energy into leading that change and making sure that we get to that end state. Now, when we talk in terms of, what makes it a success, it is really about, are we getting the benefit back from that money and time spent? And this is a huge important focus, because oftentimes our projects, from a project management perspective, are judged around, are they on time, are they on budget? And while those factors are important, we need to make sure that whatever we're doing, regardless of budget and timelines, needs to have that benefit to the organization. So we need to make sure that whatever we're doing gives back to the organization. It has that longer term benefit. And we sadly, we really need to improve our record here. So looking at some of the obstacles: ineffective change, sponsorship from senior leadership, resistance to change from the employees. We're going to be dealing with resistance to change. I think it's a third in our series, if I remember correctly. So we're going to be spending a whole bunch of time digging into that. Insufficient change management resources. We're often being told get things done faster with less resources. The reality is, people need time to go through this and to process it. We need support from our senior management, but we also need the resources to be able to do this. So one of the things we'll also be taking a look at in this series is the concept of a local change agent and what that means and how we can leverage those people to help us do that change more effectively. Nearing the bottom of our list, middle management resistance. We need to be seeing that consistent message across all levels of the organization. as a frontline staff, I look to my direct manager for guidance. So, we've just gone to the big town hall, we've gone to the big, announcement with the senior management team has come forward and, stood up on stage and said, we're doing this great big thing. I'm going to turn to my boss and say, Scott, what do you think? Right? What does that look like? So, we need to have, at all levels. Now, this is all well and great. We've got the attitudes, we've got the desire, we've got the drive. Do we have the processes? Do we have the ability? And this is where, the project management starts to come in. And when we look at, the relationship of change management and project management, think in terms of our New Year's resolutions. We have great intent. We want to go do it. Now, do we have the processes and the mechanisms to support us in doing that? Right. So we need to make sure that both are there. Ineffective communications. I always pause whenever this concept comes up when we talk in terms of change management. Many people think change management is just communication. If I do my project and I do really good communication, I've taken care of the change management piece. No, unfortunately, you haven't. Change is happening inside. It's that decision that you need to make. So if we're going to kind of equate change management with a particular skill, I would actually more equate it with influence. And while communication is completely important, and I can't do it without good, effective communication, just being an effective communicator is not going to make the change coming forward. And then the final one, a culture that is resistant to change. Again, another huge one. These are 7 very important big obstacles that we have to address. I was into a client a couple of years back, and I was in for a 5-day course. The thing was, though, they had just bought a smaller company and merged them in. So, it was a large multinational. They bought one of the small regionals. And so we're sitting at lunch on the first day, and I knew that half of my class was going to be from this new small regional that had been acquired. So I was kind of anticipating, are we going to have some resistance to change? Are we going to have some, maybe some saturation? Are we going to have some, some of those factors that typically start to play in? And while I was sitting at lunch chatting with one of the students, I quickly learned that they were from the small regional coming across. So I inquired. I said, how did that go? He says, it was fantastic. It's great. We love it. I was like, wow, I was kind of surprised by that a little bit. And as we got chatting, I learned that they had actually been bought out. It was a ridiculous amount. It was like 6 times in the last 8 years or something. Like, it was pretty close to once a year. But in that industry, that was actually a success factor. So the way this industry grows, what they would do is small regionals would be purchased by larger regionals, and larger regionals would be purchased by, in this case, it was in the U.S., so it was statewide, and then statewide would be bought by more larger regionals, which were hence became nationals, and they had just been bought by a larger international. So they were loving it. This was fantastic, and talk about a culture that embraces that change and that particular change. And what it was, I very quickly learned, was this is their version of success. So when you created that business and then you built it and it got bought, that was success, and that was kind of their end goal. So it was an interesting flip that I was not expecting. So I'm going to get you again to pop into the chat box here and answer this question. Why do you think it is taking people so much time to move from resistor to supporter, to embrace that change? It's a very natural reaction at the beginning of any change to be a resistor, to say, oh, you know what, no, not yet, thanks, I need a minute, or that sort of thing. So why is it taking them time to get there? And I want to go beyond the, not just the, what does it need to switch from resistor to supporter, but what specifically, why is it taking time? I'm seeing multiple people typing, which is fantastic. Give me a chance to sip my tea. All right, from Megan, lack of understanding of why, absolutely. It's interesting, there was one of the comments that was made in our change management session this morning with CMI is there's a lot of evidence showing that senior management embraces change faster than frontline staff and middle management. And I think a big part of that is they have a clear picture of the why. Now, how that why is communicated down is key. when we've got a large multinational and we have that whole concept of I'm leading this change, I'm doing this, and we're doing it from a senior management perspective. I'm doing it to drive shareholder value or increase market share and things like that. That's really super important and great for senior management and those running the organization. I'm using a for-profit model here. We also get into how does that translate to the frontline staff? So picture one of the big banks. They're multinational, 80,000 employees, across Canada, into the U.S., around the world, and I'm a teller servicing my customers, and they're talking about this big change that's really just not really going to benefit me very much, but it's going to drive shareholder value, right? So having a misaligned why or not understanding that why. So we often have to, as change managers and as project managers, we have to take that higher level why and translate it down into something that is meaningful for our staff, for our team, for the folks we're working with. From Angela, fear of the unknown. Absolutely agree, Angela. There's a huge survival instinct factors that start to kick in here. Anytime we're faced with change, we've got some unknowns. We're not sure where it's going to go. Depending upon how prescribed and identified that is, especially if we get into more of an agile world where we're starting to embrace that level of enterprise level agility and being able to kind of go down paths that maybe aren't that well worn, or we kind of really haven't figured out all the details. From Sinette, I guess. Apologies if I got your name wrong, Sinette. Don't understand fully the change, the why, the benefits, how it benefits them personally. Thank you for adding that benefits them personally piece. Absolutely. We got to really look at it from their perspective. Understanding the WIIFM from Judy. Yes, big, huge fan of the WIIFM. Do they see the benefits to them from Nancy? Absolutely. We've got a very savvy group today. From Malar, coming out of the comfort zone. Yes. Now, there's an interesting bit of neuroscience when it comes to that whole comfort zone piece. Our brain is constantly rewiring itself. So as we do things and as we practice, and they always say practice makes perfect. Well, no, practice makes permanent. What happens when you practice is your brain rewires itself, and it gives you those neural pathways to get those jobs done easier, faster, quicker. So the moment I step out of my established habits, I am now into a higher energy spend scenario. And what I mean by this is we can do it. It's going to take more energy. It's going to take more time. It's not going to be comfortable. And you often talk about that whole, learning, training. It is uncomfortable, absolutely. What else do we have here? Comfort zone, being comfortable with the status quo from Michael, absolutely. So an extension of what we were just talking about. Not giving proper support or information to support them from Nancy, absolutely. We have to support our team. They're already, we're already kind of fighting a bit of an uphill battle here. So we need to do some of that support. Again, the comfort zone from Jiva, and from Jennifer, organizational culture. Oh, this is such a big one. When we get into that environment where the organizational culture is not there, or is resisting the change, or preventing the change, you're kind of stuck. We need to address that. And that's a message that we often don't want to give to especially more senior management. And they don't want to hear that, right? But we do have to recognize that and realize that and address that. So let's be realistic about what it looks like within our organization. How willing are we to embrace that change? What does the culture look like? Does this change fit into the culture? Or is this change, kind of going against the grain? And, we need to kind of really think some of those things through. So our focus for this session, it was titled The 5 Stages of Change. Our focus for this session is the change curve. Now, there's a psychologist, Elisabeth Kübler-Ross, who in 1969 came up with the grief curve. And what this is looking at emotion and performance versus time. So the curve kind of goes up and down based on performance. And her initial research was around grief and loss. And then this got adapted into change. And one of the big things with change is we tend to have this sense of loss. So we look at the first stage, it's denial. oh, it's not happening, right? This kind of stuff. We move into anger. We get into bargaining, depression, the doldrums, the rock bottom piece, and then finally we get into acceptance, and that's when we start to kind of climb out of that pit. So we're going to take a look at each one of these 5 stages directly. And as we're going through this, I want you to be thinking about your own personal reaction to change you've had, as well as kind of what that looks like, and how did you go through those stages. The curve is representative, so there's a huge dip in this curve for dramatic effect. Depending upon the nature of the person, the individual, the change, the curve could be relatively shallow, could almost be flat. It can be very deep. It's going to change very situationally. So let's focus in on denial first. When we get into denial, oftentimes it starts with the shock and awe. Like, what? I remember when I was working for the bank at the time, and there was a huge announcement made. I was with the audit division, and we called this sort of impromptu entire group meeting. And because this was impromptu, we didn't have a proper meeting room for this, and there's about 200 auditors involved here. So we sort of gathered around the reception area on our floor, and there were people all standing, because there was like about 5 seats in the waiting area. We all sort of crowded in, and there was people kind of down the hall, but within earshot and this kind of stuff. And the big announcement was there were going to be some serious cuts, to the organization, and there were going to be some layoffs, and there was a bit of a restructuring happening, and so on. And people kind of walked away from that. You could see it in their faces, you could hear it in their voices. They were shocked. They were like, "What the heck's going on?" And at the time, I was a manager. And as I'm walking back to my desk with some of my team, Diana, who she'd been with the bank for 20 years, and she turned to me and she says, "Well, it looks like I'm out of here." I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Well, you heard there was going to be cuts." I said, "Yeah." Now I was a contractor at the time, so I wasn't even an employee. I said, "Yeah, if anyone's going, I'm going. It's not you." And her reaction was very much, "No, because you're more valuable than I am." It's like, "No, I'm not. I'm cheaper to let go because I'm a contractor. I'm not even an employee. You're a 20-year veteran." And she was an amazing person, by the way, and an amazing resource. So we get into a bit of that shock and awe. Now, the brain also needs some time to catch up. So when we look at that denial piece, we can also get into that. I've just been given this message. I need time to process. I need time to think about this. And we're going to touch a little bit on personality types a little bit later, but depending upon your personality type, you may need time to process and think about this. So as a change leader, as a project manager, be aware of those announcements that you make. You do your kickoff meeting. Do people need time to process this? They've just heard that news. Do we need time to process this? And then finally, looking at the history and the classic, "Oh yeah, we've seen this before. Don't worry, it'll wait. It'll go away." If we've got some failed starts in the past, that denial stage can be very inviting. Because what can happen now is I can stall into denial because I know if I wait it out, it's going to go away, right? Because that's always kind of what's happened. So I see Jennifer's just chimed in. David, can you comment on the relationship of this curve to the stages of loss and grief? The same. Yes, they are the same. If the idea is that change is a sense of loss, and what is normal? So Jennifer, very astute. Actually, I'm going to go forward because we're moving on to the next stage anyways. Very astute. This is the grief curve. And basically what research is showing is that when people go through serious change in their life, they tend to go through this same curve. Now, how deeply you go into the depression piece, how much you do the bargaining, how long you stay in various stages, that's going to be very situational. When you have a family member pass away, and we go through the grief curve, some of the factors that are going to play in, just like the change curve, how close we were to the person, how deeply does it affect me? Is it someone that was very special to me that I saw on a regular basis? My Saturday morning coffee is with with my cousin is no longer going to be happening. Is that something that I really looked forward to? Is it someone that I kind of saw at Christmas once a year? And we get into kind of some of these factors. With change, we have a sense of loss, and we tend to go through these same stages. Now, even when we have a net gain, there is still a sense of loss. Let's think in terms of we're going from paper-based to the new computerized system. Now, logically, we know the new destination is going to be way better. We're going to be able to process things faster, it'll be more accurate, we'll be able to share information. We've got all kinds of features and functions. But at the end of the day, we're still losing the old way of being, right? And sometimes we need a little bit of time to process that. Now, this can be amplified by your relationship to the old process. Think in terms of, we've had this old computer system for the last 10 years. People are kind of annoyed with it by now. It's not quite doing the job. We've got the new shiny coming in. And, we start that announcement with things like, thank God we're getting rid of this old, antiquated, useless system. Well, imagine that there's 5 people in that audience hearing that message that built that system. And for the last 10 years, have not only built it and upgraded it and supported it, but it's been their baby. You have now just dissed the last 10 years of their work and of their life, right? So we want to make sure that we're acknowledging, the benefits of the old system as we transition into the newer, better system, and allowing people to have, that period of grieving to help transition. So from Judy, from a project perspective, do they need to work through some of the curve phases to really engage in the work? Short answer, yes, absolutely. Imagine that I get stalled in anger. Okay, so I'm chugging through the change. I'm one of your people who needs to change. And you know what? During that announcement, you went and said about how the old system was a piece of garbage and crap, and the new system is way better, and thank God we're getting rid of the old system, and there's nothing good about the old. And meanwhile, I was the one who brought in the old system, and I've been putting my blood, sweat, and tears into this old system for the last 5-10 years. I'm going to have a really hard time with kind of getting moving past that stage. People are going to go through this. Now, if I'm not really married to that old system, and it's actually I'm one of the biggest critics, I'm probably going to move through this fairly quickly, right? And that curve will definitely be shorter. So, yeah, they do need to move through that. There are some really good benefits to doing this from a human perspective, in that it helps with our survival, because we don't want to rush blindly into something that's not good. Now, hopefully, as a project manager or even someone who's receiving that change, it's been well vetted and it is something that's good. But this is one of those mechanisms that kind of helps keep me safe from that. So we're going to move into anger. And you notice on the curve, and I kept the curve here, you notice there's this little boost in performance right here. Right, I'm just going to change my color. You notice that there's this little boost in performance right around the anger stage. Why do you think that is? So we get into denial, we seem to have a little boost in performance before we have a drop in performance when we get into bargaining and depression. And again, it's going to be different for different people in different situations. But why do you think we often have a little boost in performance right there? Okay, multiple people typing, I like it. People are like, I am going to do all I can to prove you wrong about this change. Thank you, Judy, I love that answer. Yeah, let's you think the old system's not working? Let me show you it work, right? This is actually a form of resistance. This is a form of, you know what, we don't need the new system because I'll make the old system work. Now, is it sustainable? No, that's why we're kind of, making this change, right? Prove the old way works from Judy, from Jiva, trying to defy the change, absolutely. People are scared, they don't know what to expect, so they work harder, from Assad. Absolutely, there's another reason. Now, think about the emotion anger. When you get anger, your blood boils. You get energy. So sometimes that performance tends to peak a little. We may also have a bit of a peak in performance from a let's get our ducks in a row, kind of get things into a good state, so that we can move forward into a little bit easier. But in general, it's usually a form of defiance. It's usually a form of resistance when we get that little peak in performance. And like I said, people get scared, energy goes up, that sort of thing. Okay, so we're moving our way through this curve here. No, denial, not going to happen. All right, guys, I'll show you this old system's great and working. Now we get into bargaining. Maybe I can be left out of the system in the change, or you know what? If you could do my team last, or what if we do this? What if you transition the rest of the organization? I'll keep my system going, and we'll do an interface piece. You're starting to do some of the bargaining, the back and forth, right? So how can we help people reduce the bargaining? Because again, we're looking at how do we help people move through this curve faster. So again, pop into the chat box and type in what you think. How can we help our teams move through that stage? And I want to focus in on the bargaining stage. Loving this multiple attendees typing. It's always my favorite when that happens. All right. Ooh, look at those coming in fast and furious. Love it. Help them see the benefits of going forward. Absolutely. Now, Elaine, it's very much a they're starting to open up to the give and take, right? So now it becomes okay. Let's take a look at some of the things we're losing. Let's take a look at some of the things we're gaining. Absolutely. Providing proper info related to the change and making comfortable with communication from LR. You can almost not over-communicate a change. Over-communicating change is really, really hard to do. So if you're gonna err on the side of over-communication. When we don't have the full story, we fill in the blanks. Right, so let's get that full story. I love Beth's answer. Offer incentives, absolutely. And really, think about it. They're bargaining. They're looking for trade-offs. They're looking for, hey, if I do this, I get that, right? So providing some of that, helping them understand the why, the value. Absolutely, we're going to be doing that throughout. Engage them earlier in the process, and ongoing from Jennifer. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Yeah, the more that we are able to engage our stakeholders in the consultation process, in the design process, in the planning process, the more we're going to have buy-in, that all important buy-in. And this is a huge piece in helping reduce that bargaining phase. Because the more I feel I can affect, or the less I've been given opportunity to affect, the more I'm going to try to. Now, if I've been given opportunities and been given inputs, and I can see that it's being well received, it's like, okay, I'm part of the team. It now becomes more of a collaborative versus an adversarial process. I'm working on an article right now, but I want to share with you the story behind it. Where I live is this wonderful little park. We back onto a provincial park, and the park's been a little bit neglected for several years. And we've had some issues. One of the retaining walls collapsed, and there's a dam there with a waterfall. It's very nice. But the custodians of the park, the conservation area, has said, we need to revise this. We need to update it. We need some serious fixing, right? Because this dam is no longer structurally stable, and we've had this wall collapse and things. So they of course started to do their stakeholder consultation, and I really have to do a shout out and give them credit. So Credit Valley Conservation. They did a fantastic job because they did multiple stakeholder engagement meetings. They got the local residents to review and vote on different options and what looks best. And this wasn't hey, we did our analysis without your consultation and we're going to go do this, right? So when Jennifer says engage them early in the process and ongoing, they did that. And it was actually to the point where during one of the later meetings, one person who had missed some of the earlier discussions tried to complain that we haven't had input into this process. Well, the local residents in the meeting actually turned and said, well, no, they have. This is like meeting number 5. They have been asking for our input. There's multiple vehicles for this because we could email them, we could phone them, we could attend the meetings and so on. So it was really interesting to see the stakeholders now actively supporting the conservation authority as they're trying to do this. Yeah. So what were some of the other ones in there? For instance, get your respected change agents to talk up, from Beth. Absolutely. The more we can be hearing this message from multiple places and multiple levels, this will help us move it through. Again, clear direction from Angela, providing that why, the what, the how. Now, notice in Angela's comment this time, we've moved beyond just the why, which is really key. Thank you for that. It's really key at this stage to start to get into the details, because that's what they're looking for. They don't have the answers to the details, so they're trying to mold that. That's what bargaining is all about, yeah? So now when you start to get into a bit more of the, assuming you have them, a bit more of the details of the why, it's like, okay, we figured this out, we figured that out. They'll start to realize that, okay, we don't have as much room to maneuver here. Be as transparent as you can with the plan. Love that one, Jennifer, absolutely. Again, and that builds on that whole engaging piece. From Angela, clear direction, the why, the what, we talked about that one. From Nancy, help them understand the new role and how it can be beneficial to them, right? Love that one, Nancy, because we really want to be helping folks see the destination, see where they're going, and how it's going to benefit them, right? Not the organization, but benefit them, right? From Hugo, show the new challenge and the importance of their participation, absolutely. From Megan, share and celebrate the successes resulting from the change. Love that one. In Cotter's 8-step model, there's a relatively early step, and apologies, I don't remember where it is, but it's celebrate the wins. And we often do this by doing a pilot program. So when I was with the bank, we did a transformation of the computer systems, and we went to this thing which was a managed desktop. So we went away from kind of just the Windows installed on your laptop to a secured lockdown, click here and download the software version of that, which is very common in today's world. So what we did is we took one group, and we took the audit group, and they were the pilot. And what we did is we all transitioned to this new environment. And based on our experience and the success we had, they advertised that back to the rest of the organization and started to make it a very inviting thing. That hey, this was easier and better, and we looked, and we worked out the issues, right? Ooh, I like this one from Sarah. This is a good one. Teach backs delivered by peers instead of just from management. Yes. We've already been touching on a little bit. The message needs to come from multiple levels. So we have, coming from senior management, from middle management, but we need to hear it from the peers. When I'm in the middle of this change and I'm hearing it from multiple levels, I'm hearing it from my coworkers, I'm hearing it from my boss, I'm hearing it from senior management, maybe hearing it from from some well-placed change agents who are, at perhaps a more front line level in the organization than I am. You start hearing it from multiple levels. Okay, this is moving forward. This is where we're going. Loving this. This is great, guys. So I promised you we would talk a little bit about personality types. Let's dig into this a little bit for a few moments. Here at Title Shift, we often use the DISC personality type. Now, DISC is union-based. There's a bunch of them that have a similar base to that. So it's about the difference between extrovert versus introvert. So we've got an energy level issue. We've got a speed. So am I a very quick talker? Am I a very more moderate pace? More introspective. So extrovert, introvert. You can tell which one I am. And then on the horizontal scale, we have people focus versus task focus, right? So am I more a people relationship person, or am I more get the job done type? Looking at those, dominance is the D of DISC, and that is the more fast-paced, extroverted, task-focused, and those folks, they want to be in control. So you get a high D in that change, they get down into the bargaining phase, they're going to want to try and take control of it and kind of steer it where they want it to go. So let's help them do some steering. Let's give them some latitude. Let's work with them in a way where they can feel like they've got some control and they're not completely losing control. Influence does not want to lose face. Influence it's very much about the relationships. These are the more extroverted but more people-focused. And what they're looking for is, how do I retain my sense of I'm good and I'm valid? And change can be very scary for these folks, because with the dominance, we have that fear of losing control. With the influence, I have this fear of losing face. Am I going to be viewed by my peers as being, less capable or not as good? Things like this. So when we look at that whole change anxiety versus learning anxiety, we want to try to reduce that learning anxiety so that we can help people kind of move into that transition. Steadiness, folks. Here we're looking for the smooth water beyond the change. And there was a comment earlier, and it was about helping people see the benefit of the new role and helping them see past the turbulent transition phase into the new norm down the road. So steadiness folks are more people focused, but they're more introverted. And steadiness they're an interesting one, because sometimes they can surprise you a little bit, because they'll if the team is kind of threatened, they'll kind of rear up, and I call this the mama bear syndrome. Conscientiousness, these folks are all about the facts, all about the data. Now, here we have the more introverted, moderate pace with a data task focus. And when we look at that, you want to change a C's mind, show them the facts, show them the data. Now, C's and S's to some extent, because they're more introverted, because they're more moderate paced, they'll often sort of kind of appear on the surface as being resistant to change, as where D's and I's on the surface will sometimes appear more ready to change, because they're a little bit faster paced, so things will change quickly. But you can have as much resistance from a D or an I as you can from an S and a C, and vice versa. Now, C's are interesting because they will hold fast when they have the data to back them up. The moment that they have data to change their mind, they switch. I love working with C's because if you have the data to back it up, you will have a quick, easy change. Totally makes sense. But that's the way they are. So when we look at what are the drivers and the fears here, conscientiousness, it's all about the data, it's about the quality of work, it's about making sure everything is correct. Steadiness, it's about the team and the relationships. Influence, it's about the individuals. Do I have that sense of self-efficacy? And dominance, it's about being in control and the achievement. So we think about those drivers and the associated fears with them. We can start to see how some of those behaviors start to come out when it comes to bargaining as well as the other stages in this curve. So moving on to depression. I was working on this the other day, and my wife kind of looked over my shoulder and saw the Kübler-Ross name of this in depression, and she said, "Oh, yeah, that's the Keebler, Martini, and Rossi stage." Sorry, a little chocolate and wine. No, never mind. So depression is when the Kübler-Ross model turns into the Keebler and Rossi. This one, we're not feeling good, so we go back to what are our comforts. The biggest issue here from a leading change perspective is, are we stalling in this stage? And it's easy to stall in that stage. Energy levels are relatively low. It can be easy to kind of latch onto that and get stalled in that. So we want to try to help our team kind of push through. This can also be in part around the middle of what I refer to as the middle of the desert, right? And at the beginning of our change, it's easy to get energy, right? We get that, hey, we're going to change, it's going to be good, it's going to be different, right? Then we get into the middle and, we're slugging through the details. Then we get into the finish and it's like, yay, we're approaching the finish line, energy, right? Right in the middle, we have that so Beth is preferring the Haagen-Dazs version. So we want to be cautious around getting stalled in that stage. All right. Now, here is our kind of destination golden nugget, the acceptance piece. So, we've been through the stages. We're moving into acceptance. We're now starting to move on. We're starting to let go of the past. We're starting to embrace the future. Acceptance, this is when we can look at acceptance can either be in the form of resignation or enthusiasm. Now, of course, we all want enthusiasm. What do we do if we have resignation? How do we deal with those folks? This is where pilot programs can become a real benefit. Now, if we think about a pilot program for a moment, I'm just going to back up here. In the pilot group is here or even potentially somewhere up here, but now I've gone back to here and starting with a new group, right? So I now have this kind of divide. And we also see this with senior management. So think about this from a senior management perspective. We've just spent the past 3-6 months going through all these details and having these discussions. We've made the decision, so we've done the acceptance. We're somewhere up in this zone here, right? We're somewhere up here, okay? And now we're announcing it to the team. Boom, they're back here. We're like, come on, let's go. Well, let's not forget that the higher we up are kind of in the the food chain, the higher up we are in the management, the more we've had time to think and process. And when we make that announcement, we're starting right back at the very beginning. So we need to kind of work through that. Sometimes we get into that resignation. Okay, well, nothing else I can do. We want to try and build some of that excitement and enthusiasm. The pilot groups can help with that. We need to celebrate the success. We've done a great job. Let's let people know that, right? We can also leverage to help others accept. So when we have those pilot programs that were a success, let's leverage those. And this is where concepts like the local change agent and pilot programs and the success stories really start to become key. Now, here is where we need to start thinking about how do we support the team going forward? How do we prevent that regression? For anyone who's ever done a new system rollout, and you leave the old system up and running, you've socialized the new system, you've trained the staff, you've set it all up, you get folks start using it, but you say, I'll leave the old system available in case. And of course, what does everyone do? They go back to the old system, right? So we need to support to prevent that regression. And this is especially key when we talk in terms of project management. Because project management, unlike change management, thinking about change, and we've got this change life cycle, but when we start to layer in the project life cycle, for users, the project delivery or completion is sometimes this early in the process for me. The new system has been rolled out. How well it was socialized or announced or communicated varies, right? So I may only just be hearing about this as it's rolling out. Now, it may have been announced and, maybe I'm still in the anchor stage and, the project has come to a completion and the new system has been rolled out and is available and should be being used, right? It may be in bargaining, I may be in depression. It could be anywhere along this curve that new system is rolling out. So as project managers, we want to be kind of aware of that because we're really kind of judged on the new system has been installed, it hit a timeline, it hit a budget number, and we walk away, right? Now, how well is it being accepted? So Dana just chimed in here. I want to address this one. Is there a place for accepting the change failure? There absolutely is. And depending upon what that looks like, if we think of this change curve, if we have just now said, okay, we've been going down this path for the last 6 months, a year, whatever that looks like, and we've decided now to say enough, we're going to shut it down, we're not going to do the new system. In a lot of ways, I'm kind of going back to the beginning here, right? Because now I'm back into the beginning of the change. Now, depending upon where I am in the curve, so if I'm up here in acceptance, that type of an announcement will likely throw me back to the beginning, because I've already kind of moved on, right? And there's another model for change, the Bridges model, which is the beginning, the middle, and the endings, the middle, and the beginnings. And what's happening there is I'm kind of letting go of the past, and I'm now accepting the future. And if I've kind of accepted that, and I'm kind of solidly moving up this path here, that cancellation of the project could actually throw me back into denial. Now, if I am stalled, okay, so if I'm stalled and let's say I'm in bargaining, or even worse, I'm in depression, and they've announced the shutdown of the project, it's like, oh, thank God. Now, what I would probably do is I'd probably jump straight into acceptance, but I'm accepting the new, right? I'm kind of, it almost kicks me out of the curve, as it were. And in those extreme examples, if I've got the vast majority who are either stalled in anger, bargaining, or depression, or some version thereof, shutting it down would actually be kind of welcome. We're starting to get into that territory of a either very poorly managed project and or a poorly managed change. The other thing to look for is the critical mass. Now, we're going to do a whole session on dealing with resistors and how do we work with them. We're never going to get 100%. You look at even the most staunch resistors, when the critical mass has been obtained and they're now the lone voice or the exception to the rule, they're now faced with a very key decision of either get on the bus or be left behind, because we're going down this path. And there's a very strong survival instinct here around we want to be part of the tribe. We want to be part of the in crowd who's moving forward. So we look for that critical mass. We try to obtain that critical mass, and of course, once we have that critical mass, we can then use that going forward, and that can really help us move forward. Now, the change curve in its pure form came out first of all with the 5 stages and kind of went into acceptance. As it was applied more to the world of project management and change management, there's been some extra stages that have been added, and the one I just wanted to add to this discussion is commitment. Acceptance, we looked at that whole concept of resignation versus enthusiasm, and we can easily get into acceptance in the form of I'm resigning myself to this is the change. Commitment is really the goal here, right? This is kind of where we want to end up, and we need to look at that from an enthusiasm perspective. So if I have acceptance at a resignation level, what can I do to transition that into enthusiasm? How do we support the change beyond the implementation of the thing, right? Project management is really good at implementing the thing. Change management is all about how do I get that behavioral, that cultural, that attitude shift so that the new thing is the new norm, is the culture. So I'm going to pose this to all of you as our last question, as we've got a few minutes left. I want you to pipe into the chat box here and answer this question. What can we do to help folks commit to the new normal? What can we do to help our folks commit to that new normal? Okay, some things coming in fast and furious. I'm loving it. Rewards, recognition from Nancy, absolutely. Recognize their efforts from Lauren. Beth, recognize, reward, insight. Love it, absolutely. Recognize. And I mean, this is Maslow's hierarchy. This is basic motivation stuff. This is how do we, reach the hearts, right? We've reached the minds. We've done that logical. Here's the benefit. Here's the why we're doing this. Here's what it looks like from a process perspective. Now we're into the emotional piece, right? Now we're into that, rewards and recognition. Now, Beth Hagemas, like the way you operate. We're now into that whole how do I reach and hit those motivational pieces? But notice in the list here, like when we talk about recognition, rewards, incentives, recognition, continued communication from Sharon there, very key, because of course what often happens, especially if my focus is on project management, I deliver the thing, I do my post-project review, we do our lessons learned, we shut it down, we move on to the next thing, and meanwhile now these poor users are left to kind of flounder, right? Share those successes, share those best practices. I love this one from Marie, stories. People love stories, right? We often get this pushback around, I don't have budget to do rewards recognitions. Here's a thought, send an email, right? Whenever I have staff come onto my project teams from other areas, I always make a point of letting their bosses know after they go back, after we release them from the project. Beth was on my project team, she did a great job. I want to give a shout out to Nancy and to Lauren and to Sharon and to all those great folks who worked on this project and made it a success, right? There was actually a newspaper, and I wish I could remember which one it was. It was a huge success. It was in the United States, and all they did was print people's names. And the founder or editor of the newspaper, they had a basic philosophy: print people's names. They would put people's names in the newspaper, and that sold it because people wanted to buy a newspaper because there was their name in it. Right? So it's that public recognition piece. We really want that. So to kind of wrap this up, we look at the change curve. It mirrors that the grief curve. It starts out with the denial. Yeah, no, not happening. Don't believe it. Into anger, right? You're not happy about this. This is bad, right? We get into bargaining. Okay, maybe if you do this, I'll give a little. You give a little, right? We get into some depression. Darn, life, so on, blah, blah, blah. Then we get into acceptance. Okay, I guess we'll have to live with it, and it's the way it's going to be. And then hopefully, we can get into commitment, where we commit to this, it becomes our new norm. And the reality is, once we've committed to it and it's there for a bit, we then get into, I don't even remember what it was like before, right? I know one of the examples I love to use when we talk in terms of change is that shift that we've had in the banking industry. As a kid, I remember growing up, banks were open from 11 till 3, Monday to Friday. And they were closed on just about every holiday. I mean, the joke was it's a bank holiday, right? And you go, well, why was that? Well, there's technical reasons. I mean, it was all paper ledgers back then. And I mean, you'd walk up to the teller and you'd fill in the paper form and you would hand it to them and they would write it in the book. And then they needed this extra time to reconcile the books, right? So we fast forward, we've now transitioned to electronic. So now instead of the teller, writing in a book, in a ledger, and then, hand copying that and consolidating and reconciling multiple ledgers in a busy branch into one, they enter it into a computer. And it's reconciled back to head office, instantly. In fact, not only have the bank hours increased, I can go evenings, I can go weekends, I can go 24/7 because I can go to a bank machine, I can go to an ATM, I can do this online, right? Talk about huge change, right? Now, imagine, for those of you who have been with us long enough to have been through that transition, do you even remember what it was like to go to a branch and walk up to that little island and write on the deposit slip and then walk over to the teller and have them process that? I mean, we forget what that was like. Hopping on an airplane to go halfway around the world. Jane, the president of CMI worldwide, was visiting. She's from New Zealand. Yesterday she was at home in New Zealand. Flew in yesterday, last night. Here she is in Toronto. When my mom, went from New Zealand to England for her big, post-graduation, graduated from college vacation, it took her 2 months to get there because you went by ship back in those days, right? So there's a huge change that's happening, and when we get into this commitment stage here, now it's become so the norm. We forget what it was like, right? To do these things, and sometimes, the skills needed to do that old method are also gone, which is good. But we've committed to that new norm, and that's the way we now operate. So a couple things to quickly remember as we wrap up here. People need time to process, right? You've had time to process, other folks need time to process. There will be a temporary performance increase, often, right? Not always, not 100%. It's often a sign of resistance or, people way of expressing. Then you're going to have that performance decrease. Now, there's a concept called learning dip. It takes you time to learn, your performance will come back up. So let's make sure that with our changes, we're allowing time for the learning dip. We're allowing for that performance dip. And we're allowing people the time to get into that long-term performance increase. So I'm going to leave the chat open for a few moments if anyone has any other questions, but I see we're at 12:59, so we're right on time here. I think many of you are aware we've been going through some really big changes within our organization. We've recently been purchased. We've got a new parent organization, and we're going through some changes within our administrative processes. So we don't have our PMI code yet today. Apologies. We will get that to you. So anyone who's signed in, just fire us a quick email. If you signed in when you registered, we do have that list. We'll send out the code then, and what we'll do is we'll update the recording so that if anyone looks at the recording, it's there. So if you have any questions or anything, type them in. Thanks everyone for your participation. Great to virtually see you all again. We'll see you next month. We'll be updating our website with the details of the next session, and hopefully we'll be able to reconnect again next month. Have a great weekend, and maybe next time we're together there won't be all this snow and ice. That'd be nice. All right. Have a great weekend, folks.